Welcome to Ladies Talking Leafs. I'm Chris.
And I'm Sil.
And this past weekend was Father's Day. So we want to just take a minute to say Happy Father's Day to all the dads out there. And we hope you all had a great day.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And starting off the show today with some great news for our podcast. We've been recognized by Feedspot as being #1 in the category of women's podcasters for ice hockey.
Woohoo!
Yay!
We also placed in the top 10, which in sixth spot, actually, for the best Toronto Maple Leafs podcast with Feedspot as well. So Feedspot, if you don't know, is a website where you can find your favorite podcasts, blogs, and media outlets, all categorized for you to enjoy in one place. Kind of like an aggregator, I guess. So you can check out our show notes for the website link to find out more about Feedspot. And while you're there, you can follow our show as well.
Yeah. All right, so let's just get to it here with, there's some Leaf news from behind the bench with the hiring of former Detroit Red Wings head coach Derek Lalonde.
Yes, so Lalonde was the Red Wings coach for 2 years, and previous to that, he was an assistant coach with the Tampa Bay Lightning from 2018 to 22, where he won 2 Stanley Cups with them. I was actually just looking into what he did with the Tampa Bay Lightning because that's where he, achieved some success. And some of the things that were part of his purview there were game day operations. Another thing that was, behind the scene was his opponent scouting. So scouting and evaluating pre-scouts for upcoming games. Player supervision. I found this one interesting because he was involved in overseeing their performance, both on and off the ice, but also ensuring that they're prepared and focused in their roles. So I kind of like that. And I think we kind of need a little bit more of that on our team. But the number one thing that he was the most involved with was as the penalty kill specialist. So with Lane Lambert going, who was involved in that for our team the last couple years, last year. Anyways.
No, just 1 year, just the one season.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Anyway, so they brought him in, and at that time, Tampa's penalty kill was like either the top ranked or very close to the top ranked penalty kill in the league. And of course, instrumental in them, winning those Stanley Cups.
Yeah. I found it interesting. Like, we're not going to hear from Derek Lalonde now. He was on TV with Sportsnet or Hockey Night in Canada being a guest analyst, I guess. And now that he's an assistant with the Leafs, forget about hearing about anything from him. But he's definitely I guess, like you said, he won the 2 Stanley Cups, and he knows the division well. A lot of people have noted that too. The fact that he obviously coached the Red Wings, but being in the Atlantic, facing Atlantic Division opponents, so he'll definitely help in that way. And he should actually, because Craig Berube is now going to be a little bit more involved in the roster decisions with GM Brad Trivell. I mean, he's probably gonna maybe, I guess, allocate some things to Derek Lalonde to handle that Craig Berube may not have time for.
And that's why I thought like the scouting and the supervision of the players' role, I thought that is actually kind of important if Berube is going to be, more involved with the front office stuff a little bit.
Yeah, and the fact too that in Tampa, Derek Lalonde also obviously was an assistant of some high-profile players, obviously star players. So he has experience in that with Stamkos, Kucherov, and Point, and that type Hedman, Victor Hedman. So that's
interesting too. He's a former goaltender, actually.
Yeah. I know. I read that as well. I thought that was. They even said that he might be able to help in that case too, right? If needed. So, I think it's a good hiring, and we'll see how it goes again, right? With, I guess, Mark Savard will still be the power play, and Mike Van Ryn, or Van Ryn. I never know how to pronounce the name. Van Ryn. He's going to be handling the defense core itself. So, I think that's going to be good.
Yeah, the last thing I never could understand why they call him Newsy. But I
Right.
guess in like 1910 or something, there was a player called Newsy Lalonde that played
Oh, okay.
hockey, but also lacrosse, and he was a really well-known player. So I guess it goes back to that Newsy Lalonde from 1910.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. I didn't
Mhm.
know that. Oh, all right. Oh,
Yeah.
cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, interesting.
Yeah, it is.
So now we're going to get into a little bit more Leaf talk now with our guest, David Alter from the Hockey News Toronto. So without any further ado, let's talk Leafs.
All right. We're less than a couple of weeks away now from NHL free agency. And to talk about this and other Leafs news items, we welcome Leafs reporter and site manager for the Hockey News Toronto, David Alter.
David is also a contributor on NHL Network, and we welcome him to the show. Thanks again for making the time for us today, David.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure. I always enjoy our chats, so I can't thank you enough for having me on.
Yeah, we know you're busy during the regular season, that's for sure.
Yes.
So it's great.
Yeah.
This is great timing for
It
get
feels
you,
like
I
it's
know.
never not busy. The only difference
That's
is I'm
true.
not moving around from city to city. That's really the only difference, which
Yeah.
does save a lot of time, I have to admit.
Yeah.
For sure.
All right. So let's start off with what we all know is the hot topic for Leaf fans heading to free agency on July 1st. And that is, of course, where is Mitch Marner going to play next season? So we've heard Vegas, Anaheim, LA, Carolina, Columbus. It's like almost every team. Where do you think Mitch is going to end up? Or is it even a possibility he comes back here? I don't know.
Yeah, it's all you can do at this time of year is kind of read the tea leaves based on all the behaviors and checking in and talking to people. And all the indications are that Mitch Marner returning to the Toronto Maple Leafs is like 0.1%. It's like,
Wow.
it's like it's not really anything. I mean, the latest we know is that even though the Leafs have tried to kind of engage with the camp, that there's just no discussion. And, usually when a player kind of knows that they're on their way out or they're trying to leverage or whatever they're doing, they'll still at least engage in the talks. They don't have to talk numbers, but they can at least engage in the conversation about the future. And I think we all thought, okay, when the season was going to end, there would be some of that because the season's over. He is under contract until June 30th. And so it's his right to kind of, not talk until free agency or whatever. But generally, when things are good or there's an open dialogue and the season's over because you don't want to talk during the regular season because of the discussions and everything, it's generally understood conversations can happen and you have that window of opportunity and you should be granted that. And that's not even happening. And so when that's not happening, that's not a good sign for the future of number 16 in Toronto. And so, I think if you just kind of look at where things have kind of progressed, the way the season ended, it's looking like it might be a situation where it's beneficial for both sides to just kind of move on from the situation. The real unfortunate part for Toronto, if that does happen, is that it doesn't look like anything's going to come back in terms of any sort of compensation. And so, a lot of that is previous regime and what they gave him in terms of no move and all that other stuff. And it's his right. He's earned that right to get that contract and do that. So it's not looking good right now. It's probably going to be somewhere else, and we won't really know where until July 1 hits. And at that point, it looks like it's going to be a combination of money and where he prefers to play. Like that's really what it comes down to with any free agents, and the chance to win, of course. So that's kind of where things stands with Mitch Marner right now.
Yeah. Do you think so? Are the Leafs? Do you think GM Brad Treliving is still in contact with Darren Ferris? Even now, in these last few weeks, yeah.
I think there's contact.
There's still,
yeah. I mean, the other thing too is Ferris represents a lot of people, so there's always going to be reasons for a GM to touch base and all that stuff. But in terms of not engaging in terms of any sort of talks or whatever the case may be, I mean that's not great. So. That's just kind of where things stand as of the recording here, June 15th. But outside of that, Things can happen. It's possible, but it's not looking very good right now. And I don't know if that's necessarily the worst thing for the Leafs, other than not getting anything back for a premier player in the NHL, just given everything else that's transpired.
Do you think that, having covered him all season, obviously you kind of can see the change in demeanor and the way he was speaking about the team at the end. I mean, one of the things that was telling for me is that he said he's going to speak to his wife, and that was going to be a big factor. Based on kind of how you know him with dealing with him, like, do you think it's more likely that he goes to the West Coast or stays here in the East?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. I mean, there's different advantages whether it's West or East. It's more going to be about the team than the geographic location, I think. Like in terms of a lot of different other benefits, quality of life, all the other things. I don't know. I don't think the tax thing is going to be a huge sticking point, but I mean, it's certainly an advantage for some of the Sunbelt teams in Vegas for sure. But I get the sense that with Mitch Marner, it's really just going to come down to who kind of makes the best offer and situation and case for him, really. Like, that's really what it's going to come down to. And so I look at that and I just see, to answer your previous question there, Mitch Marner's demeanor I actually thought was much better going into this year. Like, I thought it could have been a lot worse. I thought the year before was way rougher, like in terms of how he was kind of dealing with media about his injuries and stuff, and just kind of the things that he was saying, and even taking a break from the media at one point the preseason before, where it was a lot different this season. Like, I actually thought his demeanor was pretty good. Things didn't really sour really until, that the late part of that second round, of course, with the 2-6-1 losses at home. But I get the sense in talking to his wife and having a kid, like, it's going to be all part of that conversation in terms of what's best for them and kind of where he feels makes the most sense from a family standpoint. And so it just doesn't look like Toronto's going to be one of those places, but I couldn't tell you if it's West or East. There's certainly advantages in good teams that have the same kind of breaks, whether it's in the West or the East.
All right. So we already established that you're very close to the team, covering them on a daily basis. If Mitch is not going to be back, that is an opportunity for them to make big changes. So how do you think this is going to affect the team in the room? And is it enough to change the DNA, just, taking this person out of the team dynamic? Or what do you think might also have to come in to, further change that?
Yeah, well, it's definitely going to have the biggest ripple effect of any of the year-to-year changes that they've had in this whole tenure. Like, just, it's hard to replace who is arguably the number one available free agent on the market with anybody else. Now, that might hurt them in the regular season too, because we all know what Mitch Marner can do in the regular season. And there's always been that argument that you have to get there. And the Leafs consistently have gotten there. And that's nothing to sneeze at. That they have the longest active playoff streak in the NHL. And that's a very difficult thing to do. So it can go a lot of ways. Like, there could be some growing pains in this where the Leafs struggle to gut out a playoff spot, or God forbid the worst happens to them where they don't get in there. But there's also a situation where maybe it's for the better and they get the type of players that they've been missing that changes the culture, the attitude, or all those things. Like, they're hard workers. Mitch Marner is a hard worker. It's not that, but certainly Brad Treliving said, in addition to changing the DNA, that they got to get players who can help elevate them in those critical moments. And they just have not had those. And so that's really what they're going to be looking at coming in, is who can come in that can have a real dynamic effect on the room from a core standpoint too, and also put them over the edge to succeed in those moments where they've just not been able to succeed, i.e., the pressure points of the playoffs.
All right. So let's move on to John Tavares then. So, he's also a UFA on July 1st, and you wrote a really great article in the Hockey News about how the Leafs can work the numbers to get a deal that works for both sides. So, similar to deals like what they did with Tanev or Jake McCabe, i.e. the deferred money. So, do you like the idea of JT coming back with the Leafs as a second line center this season?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's a lot of schools of thought. There's the fact that, he's still a second line center. He scored 38 goals last year. And I know some people like to kind of diminish the fact that a lot of those came on the power play and whatever the case may be. But he's still a pretty good player. And I think he'd be at the right number, a good 2C, that if you move him to the 3C, that whatever the AAV is, it's not having a negative effect on the roster. It's not providing all this negative. Why are you paying X for a 3C when you have them slotted? I think the Leafs kind of want to get away from any sort of that kind of narrative. They really don't like to put labels on first line, second line, third line, fourth line. And you even saw, even last year, their fourth line, even though they were in the order, they were kind of getting the third line minutes from a defensive standpoint and those things. So
and is that part of Craig Berube's? Sorry to interrupt you there, but is that part of Craig Berube's style, I guess, that part of it?
I don't know if it was necessarily his style, a combination of that. Sheldon Keefe did that a little bit too, where they kind of tried to redefine what a fourth line is, because they're just trying to it's a copycat league, and I think they're trying to do things a little bit differently that can fulfill traditional roles but give themselves an edge that maybe other teams wouldn't have. And then of course that changed at home or road versus second line change or not having the second line change. But anyway, so I think they'd be comfortable with it if they can get deferred money in there. There's certainly mutual interest to bring them back, but I do think that now that some time has passed, the real sticking point is for someone like Tavares to not feel like he's just taking an obscenely low number just because he badly wants to stay in Toronto. And maybe that's the fault of Tavares for openly showing his hand too much in that regard. So there is an element in there too, but I think these seeds were planted for him to come back ever since they took the captaincy away, because if he was still captain of the team, I think it would have been a difficult situation where it's we need to move on from a different captain. And by doing that a year earlier, we're not having that element of the conversation attached to bringing him back at this point. So it makes it a little bit easier that way. He's 34. It's the same age Chris Tanev signed. And you can make the argument that you can make a 6-year deal that theoretically could work in that regard. Finding the right number is going to be tough, because when you look at the goals that he's scored, you don't want to draw too many eyes on the fact that this guy just took a complete haircut to kind of help the team. It's there, but the agents are also there to make sure their players get paid too.
Yeah, and the fans would love that. Right?
The fans would love it too, but I just don't think that Tavares people are necessarily in the business of setting new precedents, especially in a world where careers are limited. You got to get paid. You can make it work with deferred money somehow, but again, this is also an ownership that's changing structure too, and so I don't know how that's going to change the mix of what the Leafs can and can't do.
What's before we move on to the next topic, what's the first domino that you think needs to drop here? Because there's John Tavares, but then there's also Matthew Nyes and the whole Mitch Marner thing. What's the first thing that needs to get done here?
I think the first thing, what the Leafs were trying to do all summer, is get clarity on where they stand with Mitch Marner. And I think the first domino was more or less fallen. It's on its tipping point. If you could put a domino on its edge like that and stand it, I think that's their first thing with Mitch Marner right now. And just knowing, okay, that's a spot and cap space and everything that they know they need to fill. I think maybe next would kind of be Matthew Nyes, but the thing with Matthew Nyes, regardless of the money he's going to get or not get, is you have time there outside of someone offer sheeting him to kind of let that play out and start signing guys to free agency, because it's going to be a free-for-all come July 1. And so you really have to make your case and get those guys. And so having clarity on Marner and then I guess Tavares and getting a number agreed upon before July 1 would be 2. And that's just mostly because of chronology, right? Like you have time with Nyes, barring he doesn't sign an offer sheet, which I don't think is going to happen. Yeah. Or you get that understanding that you don't think it's going to happen right away. And then just knowing that you don't have Marner back and knowing what number you have on Nyes, those are the things that have to fall, because you really want to kind of get a sense from a cap standpoint of what you have in order to know how you can address it in free agency with how much money. So remember, you can go 10% above the cap too. And so the Leafs will have to factor that calculation as well in terms of what they can and can't do in terms of free agents that they are looking to sign to change that DNA.
Yeah. Well, yeah, Brandon Pridham, thankful for having him in the office. That's for sure for that. But all right. So you mentioned before about Mitch Marner, and the replacing what he has given the Leafs, obviously a 100-point season. And yeah, who basically GM Brad Treliving needs to replace those points. And who do you think would be a good fit to play on Austin Matthews' right side out of the options that we have? For right winger possibilities, there's not a lot out there. There's Patrick Kane. That's one guy that we've heard. Brock Besser, Andrew Mangiapane. That's the only 3 that I could come up with to say. Or do you think that they're gonna wait and see and maybe do something through trade?
It's possible. Yeah. Look, it's possible. You mentioned all that stuff. Look, I think it goes without saying that someone like Brad Marchand would certainly fit what Toronto wants to do. Yeah. And I don't know if you necessarily have to switch with your other guys on what side he plays or whatever.
He's a left winger. Yeah.
Right. And so, they've moved Max Domi to the right side of Austin Matthews with some success before. And so if you want to do that, you can kind of go Nyes, Matthews, Domi if you have to, in order to spread out some of the depth and kind of move things around that way. And so you look at that, you look at some of the other things there. The Kane and Taves one is getting a lot of chatter too. Just if you can kind of get them in the package and say,
I hadn't even thought of Taves too.
Yeah.
Jonathan Taves is Jonathan Taves is an interesting one because it's probably look, he's going to want to get paid, but I think there's an understanding that that's going to be a project, right? So you can kind of, with a plus 35-year-old guy, you can do similar to what you did with Max Pacioretty, where you can make the money work, sign someone who's really just kind of going to have the ability to get his game back. But if you keep him out of the lineup, the cap hit is minimal, and then just put in games played bonuses to make him whole. And then have him available for the playoffs. And if he ends up showing that he is that same kind of player and free and clear of all the stuff that plagued them before, well, then you have depth at the center position. And you have experienced, winnable depth if you get a home run with someone like Taves. But if not, it's a low risk there. And then if you can partner him with Kane, then it's you have...
It's a known chemistry there.
Yeah, there's an interesting thing. There's an interesting dynamic there. So I don't know because, the Leafs need help at center. Obviously, Sam Bennett is one of the best ones available in terms of changing what the Leafs would want to do. But I don't see it happening. I see Marchand to Toronto more likely than I see Bennett to Toronto, but I could be completely wrong on that.
Yeah.
Bennett, in that case, then you can spend a little bit lower to shore up your center depth. And because that's really number one. The Marchand one's going to be expensive, but at the same time, what he gives you in the playoffs you need centers. Like, you really do. So, like, what does that leave you if you don't get Bennett? Like, there's not a lot out there. You might have to trade for it. So you can kind of look at some value propositions that way. Because to me, that's the number one. That and maybe a number one defenseman, depending on how the Morgan Rielly stuff plays out.
Yeah, but can you imagine too? Like, let's say like there's Patrick Kane, Jonathan Toews, Max Pacioretty, John Tavares, like, and Brad Marchand. They're like all like 34, 35. We'll probably be the oldest team in the league then, obviously, right? Hopefully.
Maybe.
I don't know.
But the argument now, like I was helping a colleague and I wrote a thing about it, and I was looking at the average age of the goal scorers in the playoffs compared to the regular season. Like, what's been the Leafs' biggest problem right now is succeeding in the playoffs, right?
Yeah.
So really everything should be geared towards how you can. The Leafs use the word tapering with Austin Matthews in the regular season. Why, like, in terms of like toward the end of the year when he wasn't taking part in practices or whatever. But really, everything should be kind of like tapering in the regular season. Make sure you make the playoffs, but making sure that when it comes to the postseason, it's go time. And I thought Max Pacioretty openly admitted it at the end of the season. He said, "It's no secret. I was brought here for the playoffs." He was 37. He scored the two most important Leaf goals of the playoffs. Game 6, game-winning goals in the first and second round when they needed it, when things were kind of looking like skittish.
Well, and look at what Marchand's doing. I mean, that guy, his speed is like blowing my mind right now. Like,
right, he's got the speed. He's got, like, if you can conserve your energy and have the. Like, I looked at the average, I did a bar chart in one of my stories. The average age this season of goal scorers from the beginning of the season to now. And so it went up by it was like 27 years in 1 month. And it went up every month by a month, which makes sense because everyone's getting a month older. But from April to May, it shot up 6 to 8 months. And from May to June, it shot up another 8 months.
Wow.
So what does that tell you? That tells you that the freewheeling, youthful, exuberant way to score goals is just not there in May and June. It isn't.
Right.
And it's the only of the four majors where the game, the way it's played, what you watch in front of you compared to what you watch in the regular season is fundamentally different. Like, everything in the playoffs is about winning battles, hockey IQ, and throwing stuff at the net. It's not necessarily about sheer skill. It isn't. And like, that stuff can be on display for the regular season and it makes for great social clips, but the way to succeed in the playoffs. So like, it just, the older players excel. So if you can sign these plus 35 guys to incentive laden deals that pushes the bulk of that cap hit into the following year, you can really get exactly what you need for that year right now by paying the younger people what their money is in the regular season and allotting a lot of that performance bonuses, which are very simple games played thresholds. Like, Pacioretty's was 35 games and that's it.
Yeah.
Like, you can easily do that for the Taves and Canes of the world as well.
And that just kind of shows, like what you're saying from your article, just kind of shows that with the older guys, like, winning, it's about winning and winning in the playoffs, right? And they're showing that when it counts, and they want to win because they're coming closer, obviously, to the end of their careers too, right? So it just kind of proves that they're seeing that and they want to win. They want to win the Stanley Cup.
Yeah, there's three things that I see there. So there's experience, drive, but then there's also longer to ramp up. So they're hitting their stride probably later than the young guys, right?
Yeah.
So they're peaking at a much later time, which is perfect for the playoffs.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, there is that too. That's actually a really good point. I hate to bring wrestling into it, but like when The Undertaker would come back for his matches, he would always talk about how he just didn't have it for whatever reason. And so what he started to do to make himself feel better before matches or whatever is he would need to go on a bike for like about an hour, or a rowing machine, casually just getting the blood flow and movement in his body for like an hour before he went out to the ring, because as you get older, your body needs longer to ramp up. But just to your point, if you can do that and get that in there, those guys are having their moment because, they are now getting to their peak in the season instead of draining the tank empty earlier on. And it's an interesting sports science debate of how younger players can do that, because even now, like, I'm 43 and I go into the gym and I'm picking up stuff. Like, I'm actually able to tell myself I don't need to go full ham right now. And the 20 and 30-year-old of me never bit into that. I was always just like, go. And then I didn't have anything at the end. And now I have more endurance because, I'm like, I should be fading, but I'm not, because I'm able to tell my body, don't kill yourself on this. And because of the restriction, the physicality there, I actually have more in the tank at the end, because the younger me would just expel most of it earlier on.
Yeah, it's a really interesting debate, I think. But like as there's more and more longevity in sports because of sports science, nutrition, everything, we're probably going to see a lot more of this, right?
Yeah, and it's just tough. But what this also does too is I just wish there was more juice behind the regular season games. Like, gets so long and monotonous that I think the playoffs here has just made more of the case to just try to figure out a way to make these regular season games more interesting, like the NBA did with the mid-season tournament that uses existing regular season games. But that's a whole other debate.
Yeah. It's like they could look at changing the team, the point structure too. Maybe that would incentivize.
They'll never do that as long as Gary Bettman is. As long as Gary Bettman is commissioner, they're not going to do that. They're not going to expand the playoffs. But who knows? We'll see what the next CBA actually says.
They will try a third time to go to Atlanta.
Well, that's a whole other thing.
Exactly.
That's a whole other thing.
Yeah.
Yes. That's for another podcast down the road.
Yeah.
All right. So, obviously, for Leafs Nation, for fans, we are in, anticipation of free agency opening up. But when you look at Brad Treliving and how he likes to build his teams, do you feel he's more the type of GM that likes to round his team out at free agency, or is he more of a guy that is going to, go into the pool, but inevitably he's going to wait until the trade deadline to really fine tune and get the team that he wants to ice for the playoffs? What do you think?
Well, it's tough to say, because a lot of fine tuning in the playoffs that the Leafs have, or in the trade deadline that they've had to do, is really kind of out of necessity, because they had cap space and they had draft picks and everything to kind of use. They don't really have much of that now. So I think they really have come to the realization that if they want to have any sort of future prospects kind of coming in and figuring stuff out, even though if they're in win now mode, is try to do their best now, because like we mentioned with those plus 37 guys who are going to come later, like Max Pacioretty in a lot of ways was like a deadline acquisition in terms of not seeing him from February to whatever. And then game 3, here's Max Pacioretty. So that was a way to do it. That's why they weren't, look at the cost of what Scott Lawton and Brandon Carlo.
I know.
That was a huge expense. They don't have any more things like that to kind of use. So, even the Jake McCabe trade tree is still going on from that Toronto-Chicago deal. There's a second round pick, I believe, that was involved in that one that the Leafs don't have for this year. The third round pick is also gone. That was involved in that Anaheim trade the other day. So the cupboard is bare. It really is. So you really kind of have to go and try to figure this stuff out, and maybe trade a core piece if that's possible.
So you mentioned Morgan Rielly. Is he the one that you're looking at that way?
Well, that's a tough one, because Morgan Rielly had a down year, and he has a high cap number, and he's committed to for a very long time. And so you have to see if he's open to that kind of move. But the reality is, they didn't have they had Mitch Marner playing in that spot that Morgan Rielly would normally play on PP1. And you need to fill PP1. And if Rielly is not that player anymore, I get the sense that you kind of need a new top 4 defenseman in that regard. Outside of that, the defense is set. Like, that's really it. So, and if Morgan Rielly can figure out ways to kind of find his form and figure that part out, maybe you don't need to do that. But even if you ate some of that, that would free up a lot of cap space to try and figure out a solution at the defense. And, Aaron Ekblad is a free agent, different side shot or whatever, but still, there's like, you could tinker there, but defense and goaltending is pretty much set. Like, it's really like centers and you can't really tinker at the deadline. You've got to just go and do what you can. And so with Brad Treliving, it's kind of hard to pinpoint the style, because in Calgary, his biggest issue there was trying to get people to kind of stay there long term, where the right type of player wants to come to Toronto long term. That's not an issue there. There's a lot of narrative about Canada now, but the right type of player does want to come here for under the right circumstances, and the Leafs have the resources to make those players whole.
Do you think that they're going to ultimately take a bit of a step back, though, next year, as with regards to points and all of that? I mean, I think they probably still will make the playoffs, but do you see them taking a bit of a step back?
Well, I expected that to happen last year. And I think when Craig Berube came in, I think he thought that might happen a little bit too. And that might have actually been better for someone like Berube, because he could have, used the stick a little bit more than use the carrot for his type of coaching style, and maybe get more of those lessons learned in the regular season than in the postseason, where you really don't want to be learning those lessons, right? Yeah. So, I think a lot of people were kind of surprised at how well the Leafs performed in the regular season under a new head coach. I certainly was. I thought they would move further back, but they won their division in that type of division for the first time in I don't know how long. So, I mean, look, there's teams in the division that want to make a move. The Sabres are sick of missing the playoffs. I expect them to make a push. Ottawa and Montreal showed a lot of resilience this year. There's nothing in my mind that would make me feel like they're going to take an additional step back. Maybe Boston struggles again this year, but even then, it's hard to count out the type of caliber players that they do have. And we'll see what they do in free agency. So it's going to be tough. But I do think that it might be better for them to take a step back if it means getting the right type of players for them in the postseason. But again, only 16 of 32 teams make it. You really don't want to go on the slippery slope of not making it, because then your whole plan is shot. And then we're having a different conversation.
Yeah. 2 players I actually want to ask you about. You mentioned Scott Laughton. What was the dynamics, the relationship with Craig Berube? Because he kind of, like, when he first got here, he kind of just like put him on the 4th line. He had him all like, they got him for as a 3rd line center. That's what they were hoping him for. They gave up the 1st round draft pick, but then it was just like he had no confidence in him, and that really didn't serve Scott Laughton very well, obviously. And he started to ramp it up better in the playoffs, I thought.
Yes.
But do you expect, like, for next season, like, hopefully that relationship with the coach and that it'll be better, or at least he'll...
I don't know if the relationship with the coach was what it was. I think it was really just a player who loves being here, who in a young room had more of a voice, was coming to an already established core in a way different vibe, and trying to find his spot there. And I think that just permeated with everything else that goes, like, when you go into a new room, it's not an easy adjustment, especially mid-season, when roles and where you sit on the plane and all those kind of things are already well established, and you're kind of learning that. And so there's been cases where a lot of players kind of struggled, but once they get to the playoffs after that deadline, they found their role and thrived. Actually, the best example of that, it's funny to bring it up, was Max Domi with the Dallas Stars.
Oh, yeah.
Like, he really didn't seem like he had a role there, but was actually one of the better players for them in that run 2 years ago,
right,
when they got to the Final Four then. So, and he kind of found his role there and was able to turn that into a pretty decent 1-year deal with the Toronto Maple Leafs. But yeah, I actually really liked his play a lot. Really good guy to talk to and get a sense, has a real pulse for what this market is and wants. Certainly that's all extra. Like, you have to perform, but he's going to have a full year under his belt this year.
Yeah.
And I expect he's going to be asked to do those things you mentioned in the beginning, and will have much more success with it, with a bit of a different dynamic in that room this year.
All right. And then the other guy going at the other end of the spectrum is Easton Cowan. I mean, he's coming up now, a Memorial Cup win. Do you think he's ready for the big show? Like, will Craig Berube give him the opportunity that way, or is he going to be with the Marlies?
I think he's going to get the shot. Like, he's going to be that guy at camp that's going to be playing the most preseason games, all the like Willie or won't he type of games, trying all different situations. Because I think if he shows he's ready for it, they would like him up there, but they're not going to force it. There's no way they're going to force it. So this is going to be up to Easton Cowan to really show that he's backing up all the talk that he's done in all these interviews, that everything going back to junior was to prep himself for all the things you need to have to be a pro. It's easy to kind of exhibit all that stuff from a leadership standpoint, but it's harder to transpose that and you know, it's tough because he probably is someone who would have probably done better from a development standpoint being with the Marlies last year. Just wasn't possible.
Yeah.
So it's tough. Like, if he's matured and he's not making mistakes that rookies make, and he shows a real improvement in his positional play and where he needs to be at that speed of the game, then sure. But he's really going to have to win and prove himself into that spot, but he'll be given absolutely every opportunity to do so.
Yeah. All right. So, final one for you here, because I did have another one, but we'd be going on forever. We'll have to have you on again for sure.
It's okay. You can ask as long as you want.
So, each time we've had you on the show previously, though, we've had you on a few times. You've mentioned, or we've asked you about your favorite rink meal, right? Because you go around the league.
Yeah.
And so far, Detroit has been at least from the last couple of times we've had you on, Detroit has been the undisputed king of media meals. So this past season, is it still Detroit as the king, or?
It's so funny you're talking about this because this week I finally got a new camera rig set up here, and I'm recording 4 videos where I'm going to be ranking them in quarterly tiers.
Oh, wow.
Like,
all right.
A video of 25 to 32, another one of, the next 8 teams all the way up to 1 through 8, like a 4-parter. So Detroit is still, I'm not spoiling anything by saying Detroit is still the undisputed king of media meals. It really is the business. Like, it's just...
So what do they have that's so great, though, there? Like,
well, you've seen the videos, right? Like
but for our listeners, tell them what.
Yes.
In case.
Well, it's okay. So it's $11, which is fine. Like, I'm not against paying. Like, I'm self-employed. So, like, a lot of people in my comments are like, doesn't your employer pay that? I'm like, no, I'm self-employed. I pay that. So I can comment on that. But it's not about the money or whatever. Yeah. Like, it's a factor. It's really about the quality and quantity. And the Detroit one is like 7 courses. Like, you go through this long buffet line where you think, okay, that's enough food. And then there's more. like the first one station is kind of like a salad area. And you're like, okay, whatever. And then you're like, oh, there's soup and there's all this stuff. Okay, that's good. Okay, now we've got all this protein. I'm like, okay, that's interesting. Next station, there's like a carvings. Sorry, I had to sneeze. There's a car. Yeah, I'm sneezing more on camera. Where usually the adrenaline used to carry me over, and I wouldn't have to sneeze. But it's there's like a carving station, like for prime rib. And then when you think that's done, they have like pizza, and then after that, they have wings. Like those are
Oh my
staples
God.
that you're like, oh my God, this is just continuing to go.
Never
And
ending
it's all
food.
really good.
Yeah.
It's all really good. And then they have pretty decent desserts and ice cream station as well. So like
Right.
the
So
quantity and the quality, the combination for what you're getting just cannot be beat. It's like appointment viewing.
yeah.
To the point where it's like they actually know me because one of my TikToks showed up on their feed and like, you're that guy that does the media meals all around. I'm like, yeah. I was so happy about that. And so
It's a good deal for
that's taken,
$11.
yes. And so like, there are some that charge, some that don't
Mhm.
charge. And really what it comes down to is just the quality of everything. And Detroit is just the business. It really is. The most improved this year was Anaheim. I was actually pleasantly surprised. Usually it's cash only in a building that's in the suburbs where you're not near an ATM. and then even then it's small. The quantity wasn't huge, but the quality was superb. Like the beef was good. They had this like corn that was seasoned really well. That was just amazing. Like what they gave you, it was all really tasty. And really it's all about the taste. That's
Yeah.
always number one. And then it comes down to, the quantity, the variety. Quantity and variety are huge. And then of course the price does weigh into it. Like Edmonton's is the most expensive. In fact, a big controversy I've learned over the last two Stanley Cup finals when the leagues take over for meals. Usually it's free, but Edmonton continued to charge where Florida did not. But the Edmonton meals are expensive. It's like $23 after tax, and they want a tip as well.
Oh,
so
wow.
like there's like a tip queue as well, which is hilarious for like a media working meal area. But yeah, so
All right. Well,
my plan for this year is I'm going to do videos again, but every time I'm in a city, it's going to be that city's opportunity to move up and down the power rankings of media news.
oh,
Okay. Well,
cool.
so
Yeah, you can.
fans, you can check that out. Look for that
That's
coming
for
up.
sure. Yeah, David Alter is going to be the hockey food critic soon.
That's right.
Oh, well, I'm starting. I do it with hotel rooms, and I'm doing it
Oh,
with
my.
like I'm trying to. Every year I say this, and I add a little bit more, but I really want to make covering the thing more the experiential element of it,
Yeah.
of what it's like on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
I want to bring that element to people who follow along, and so
Yeah.
that's what I'm really trying to do here. And so the media meals were one, hotels and where I stay is another one, and hopefully there'll be a little bit more this season.
Well, we will look forward to that. So, David, thank you so much again for being our guest. And everyone, you can look out for those features coming up next season. And again, check out David's articles on thehockeynews.com. And you will find a link to his articles in our show notes as well. So, thanks a lot, David. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Always appreciate being on.
So thanks again to David for coming on the show. He's great, obviously a wealth of knowledge because he's with the team day in, day out at practice, on the road, at home, everywhere. But the thing that I found actually interesting was his comment with John Tavares, where he was talking about the captaincy and how like it kind of would have been awkward if John Tavares was still the captain and they were trying to negotiate this contract. And not that the Leafs are going to be trying to lowball John Tavares or anything like that, but they obviously need him to take a pay cut, right? And with him being the captain, if he was still the captain, that would kind of make it, just the optics of it would be a little bit different. I don't know.
That was a perspective that I hadn't really thought about, but it really made the timing of all these decisions make even that much more sense.
It's almost like they thought of that.
Yeah.
Like the Leafs thought of that in advance of not to say like Austin Matthews, obviously it's his team and he was ready to to become the captain of the Leafs, but just this other part of it to do with the contract situation, that and John Tavares, I didn't think of it until he mentioned that. So that was something that I took from the conversation.
Yeah, it probably doesn't really surprise me if you think about it, in hindsight, with Brandon Pridham and, the attention that they pay to the cap. And, I'm sure that they've got projections 5 years or more even out, right? So, it makes a lot of sense that they did it that way. And it just makes everything a lot more easy, like you said, optics wise, to be able to get him in at a more reasonable number.
Yeah. And he pretty much confirmed that Mitch Marner is probably not coming back.
Yeah. He said 0.1% or something like that.
Yeah.
So
I think we knew that wasn't a big surprise.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But all right.
I guess we'll all get used to the idea, and
a couple of weeks away from that, we'll see what happens. We'll finally get to find out about that. And
I think I think we'd be all a lot more shocked if he does come back.
Yeah.
There could be an uproar there.
Oh my God. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, another big news item from this past week, though, was that the voice of the Leafs, Joe Bowen, announced that he'll be retiring his mic at the end of next season. So that will be his 44th season calling Leaf games on TV and radio. And it's definitely going to be tough to get used to not hearing Holy Mackinac calling Leaf games. So, I actually was looking up, and I forgot that his son actually in a game a couple of years ago, I guess it was a next gen game. He sat in the booth with his dad. Yeah, and he called the second period, I think, of the Leaf game. So they were saying that maybe if the Leafs would consider maybe having the son replace him. He's only 25 years old, though.
It's interesting because Rogers has already sort of done that in a way with the Blue Jays, because Dan Shulman does the TV broadcast, but his son, Ben, does the radio broadcast. I don't know. There's some precedent for it. So I guess we'll see. Obviously, there's going to be tryouts for this, but, he's leaving big shoes to fill, but he says all the time that he can't believe that he got to fill the shoes of his idol, Foster Hewitt. So, back then, nobody would have thought that anyone could take over from him. And he did, and he made it his own, right? So it's definitely going to be different, but hopefully some young person will step in and breathe, a different life into calling these games. So,
yeah. And I hope, it would be nice. There's some people on social media, there's doing a petition to actually have Joe Bowen on TV. Sometimes, it would be nice once in a while. It doesn't have to be all the time, for every game, but if they could somehow do that, and definitely I think the Leafs will have a night to honor him, obviously.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
And obviously the best way to honor him is to make this next upcoming season's playoff run the longest we've had in a long time, and culminating in lifting a trophy.
Yeah, exactly.
That would be the best send-off that anybody could ever have.
And definitely one that he would love to, that Joe Bowen would love to have. That's for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So a programming note, our next episode will be available on Thursday, July the 3rd, with free agency on Tuesday, July 1st. We want to give you, our listeners, the most Leaf news that we can. So we're going to be publishing a day later than usual. But if after that, if there are any other big Leaf news items, we will definitely be having a bonus show. The easiest way to keep up with all the Leafs news is to hit that follow button on Apple or Spotify or wherever you're listening to our podcast, and we'll have you up to date on everything Leafs throughout the year, including the summer. So we'll be going all summer long. So if you're watching on YouTube, just hit that subscribe button, and you can also find us on the Believe network at Believe.com. It's BLEAV. And we'd love to hear from you too. So still trying to get that rating on Spotify and or review. If you can take the time to do that, it's so important to get feedback from our listeners, and we thank you for taking the time.
Yes, a 5-star would be nice.
Yeah.
Okay, so also don't forget to look out for us on the new hockey content website, hockeyhotstove.com. And another way to help us out, of course, is by visiting our Ko-fi page at ko-fi.com. You can follow us there, and if you choose to, you can support us by buying us a coffee. Any donation goes towards helping us produce the show and making it even better for you. You can find the link to our Ko-fi page on our show notes or in any of our social media profile pages.
And as always, we say thank you to our healthcare workers and first responders for all that they do.
And we thank you, as always, for listening and watching Ladies Talking Leafs. Till next time, go Leafs, go.
Do you believe?